Hi, everybody. Welcome to this new episode of Pax Americana. I'm here with Olga Latman. Really good to see everybody this Thursday morning here in New York City. It's finally nice and warm in New York. I feel like we've had a very, very, very long cold spring, but it looks like summer is finally here. So, really good to see you today, Olga. So much to
Me
talk
too.
about. Some of it we covered on Tuesday on our emergency Substack Live, but I do want to talk about Trump's readout because, of course, he's doing his own readout of his discussion with Vladimir Putin. They had a discussion about what was happening in Ukraine, about Ukraine's attack on Russian installations. Russia did finally admit, I believe, that Ukraine did attack them because I think they couldn't deny it. We had some interesting comments, I thought. I did a Substack on this. We can go into this more, but interestingly, you had Keith Kellogg, who is the special envoy for Ukraine, which is fascinating in and of itself because you have Steve Witkoff as a special envoy for Ukraine also, but he's tasked with dealing with Putin, whereas Keith Kellogg, I guess, is tasked with dealing with Ukraine. Very, very weird. Regardless, he said that this is going to make everything much, 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 much more dangerous because, of course, Russia will have no choice but to retaliate. So I guess under that scenario, Ukraine should just lie down and take it because otherwise Russia would just retaliate. Like, what has Russia been doing for the last 3 years, Mr. Kellogg? But
I know.
yeah, but what I want to talk to you
They
about
might
is,
they might invade Ukraine.
yeah, exactly. They might threaten to nuke the United States and Great Britain and other NATO countries one more time, I guess. What did you make of this readout? And maybe you could tell people a little bit about this readout. What did you make of it? And what did you think uh, Trump was getting at by saying what he said, which is that he spoke to Putin and Putin's going to retaliate and we're not anywhere close to peace, which I don't think you need to talk to Putin to understand. But what do you think?
Well, basically, that part actually, made a comment about. It's basically the United States is giving the green light for Putin to retaliate. And Trump and all his officials know that Putin's, attacks. First of all, this is in retaliation.
Right.
Ukraine wouldn't even be striking inside of Russia had Russia not launched a full-scale invasion. Um, but with Trump telling, warning and parroting Putin's, threats, he basically is giving the green light to Putin, like, go ahead, retaliate. And this comes off a week where last week we saw Russia launch over 1,000 drones in a matter of 3 days, um, and attack Ukrainian homes. And it was horrific. And then on top of the dozens of missiles. And so the fact that, the United States, first of all, the whole thing is absurd. I mean, Trump shouldn't even be talking to Putin, but he keeps providing Russia with, cover. They keep stalling with these, whatever negotiations, which gives me that word in itself gives me an allergy because there's nothing to negotiate. Um, but, Russia keeps pushing down the line. And yes, we'll have another meeting, another meeting. They have no intention of ending this war. If they did, they can actually, recall all their troops and go back over the border. And Trump, it's disgraceful, the fact that he gave Russia a green light. To basically attack Ukraine, knowing that it's going to be Ukrainian civilians who are going to die because Russia doesn't attack, military targets.
Yeah, what I think is so fascinating about this is Trump keeps giving, well, it's taco foreign policy, right? Trump always chickens out, but in this case, it actually has real life ramifications,
Yeah,
even
lives.
beyond even beyond tariff stuff, which is that he keeps giving Putin a 2-week deadline and everything.
Yeah,
Going back to April, when he kept getting asked by reporters, what are you going to do about Ukraine? What are you going to do? Well, I'll let you know in about 2 weeks. 2 weeks later, I'll let you know in about 2 weeks. 2 weeks later, I'll let you, including I think this week or last week, I'll let you know in about 2 weeks.
yeah,
And I'm sure in 2 weeks, he'll let us know again in 2 more weeks. Meanwhile, there is a sanctions bill that is co-sponsored by, I think, something like 80 senators, if not more,
Maybe two.
led by Lindsey Graham,
Hmm.
who I have to say, and I'm going to pause here for a second to talk about Lindsey Graham because I think it's relevant. I worked on two pieces of legislation during the Biden administration with Lindsey Graham. Nothing to do with foreign policy, everything to do with my nonprofit work. Lindsey Graham has a very unique role in the United States Senate. He really is say what you will about him, he really is a kingmaker. If Lindsey Graham signs on and starts pushing something, the odds of it getting over the finish line increase. And listen, there's a lot to be said about Lindsey Graham, but I'm just telling you the facts of how it goes in the Senate, both on the Democratic side and the Republican side. He is one of those senators who truly makes a difference. So the fact that Lindsey Graham is leading the charge here is, I think, very important and critical and vital to Ukraine. And the Ukrainians should be thrilled that this is the person who's leading the charge. However, you have you have MAGA adjacent people basically saying that Trump should arrest Lindsey Graham for trying to help Ukraine, for going. I believe Steve Bannon said that he should be arrested for going over to Ukraine and effectively propping up Volodymyr
Yeah.
Zelensky. So you've got this competing thing where you've got the Senate overwhelmingly voting to impose sanctions. The House, I don't know. I don't think will ever take it up because I don't think Mike Johnson will do anything that Trump doesn't want him to do. And it's clear that Trump does not want the sanctions bill.
No.
So my belief is that this is going to die on the vine. A lot of people think, well, he won't be able to ignore the Senate, not when there's 82 or 81 Senate co-sponsors. Yes, he will, because even if the Senate passes it, it'll never get to Trump's desk.
Look, my thing is, I think Europeans and definitely Ukrainians understand that the US is out of the equation. I mean, frankly, right now it's proceed without the United States. I keep saying, I'm shocked that Trump hasn't, issued a weapons package for Russia yet, because this is where we would be. But I want to talk about something with the phone call that really didn't get attention.
Right.
And I actually wrote, because the Ukraine stuff, I mean, it is so like, I don't know. It's like a ridiculous spectacle. I mean, it's like some kind of a sick satire watching every time they have a phone call, these meetings, whatever. But in the same conversation, and this is what I wrote a Substack about, and I'll include it in the show notes. In the same conversation, Trump, who is desperate to have a deal with Iran, mentioned that Putin is going to offer to negotiate the Iran deal. Now, the main part of this, the problem is that Iran has nuclear weapons. Now,
Not yet, but they're about to. Yeah.
well, they're
Yeah.
very close to
Yeah.
having.
Yeah.
Now, just in case people don't know, Russia has been one of Iran's longest allies. For over a decade, Russia has been assisting with Iran's nuclear projects. Over since the full-scale invasion, and I know this, Russia has been sending Iran nuclear materials and how logistical people and scientists to help with Iran's nuclear project in exchange for drones and weapons. After Russia launched a full-scale invasion, Iran sent IRGC
Mhm.
thugs, which the Revolutionary Guards, to Crimea to train Russian military personnel. And then Iran runs, the proxies, Hezbollah, Hamas, and Houthis. Now, let's break them down. Hamas. Russia has a long-standing relationship with Hamas since its formation, since the late 80s. Um, they provide them with weapons. And what is interesting is that before the October 7th attack, that Russia has a crypto exchange that is sanctioned. That money went through this crypto exchange, Garantex, and then went off to Hamas. So you have Russia who provides weapons to Hamas. You have Russia who provides logistical support to Hamas. You have Russia then let go to Hezbollah. Russia had joint centers, intelligence centers inside of Syria and Iraq with IRGC and Hezbollah. And they were, all working to prop up and massacre hundreds of thousands of Syrians. So you have Russia who provides weapons, logistical, intelligence support to Hezbollah. And then the Houthis, who are supposed to be also our enemies. Russia last October, the Wall Street Journal revealed that not only is Russia providing weapons to the Houthis, but that they were providing intelligence for targets to target ships on the Red Sea that were passing. And that Russian military intelligence, GRU officers, were in Houthi controlled areas. Assisting with the Houthis with their operations against Israel and in the region. So the fact that Russia would sit down and mediate a deal, help me broker a deal with Iran to give up their nuclear program when Russia is practically the sole sponsor of their nuclear program. I mean, the whole thing is laughable. And that didn't get that much attention, except that, it was mentioned in passing that Putin offered to broker a meeting and that they were excited about it. I mean, this is like asking, and I actually made that comment, it's like asking an arsonist to mediate a fire.
The one thing that and this is not going off on a tangent because I would love to get your opinion on this, is in the last few weeks, Trump has really made a complete U-turn on all of this, right? Iran, which he was threatening to bomb into oblivion, he built an entire career out of trashing Obama's Iran nuclear deal. He wants to basically conclude at best what Obama had done over a decade ago, I believe. You have that. You have him cutting a separate deal with the Houthis, effectively saying, you leave us alone, we're going to leave you alone, which is very strange because the Houthis continue to send missiles to against our ally, Israel. Left the Israelis high and dry there, seems to have left the Israelis high and dry on Iran without checking with them and basically warning the Israelis, don't you dare do anything against Iran while I'm trying to conclude this deal. And apparently we're now welcoming Syrians in with open arms without vetting them. They're not on the list of countries from which citizens can no longer come. Interestingly, Cuba is. I don't know how Marco Rubio and Ted Cruz feel about that. But all of that, I think, is interesting. And I wonder if you think there's a Russian connection to this or if this is something totally separate.
Absolutely. 100%. Because I will tell you, I remember this was the most fascinating thing that I ever watched, one of them. Um, when Trump was in office the first term, you remember, ordered the hit on Soleimani,
Mm-hmm.
and it was successful. And right away, as soon as this was announced, I go to check Russian news and monitor their chatter. They were so furious. But interestingly enough, they provided cover, and I even documented this on Twitter at the time. Within 40 minutes of this news breaking, they said, we don't think that Trump would have ordered this, hit on him. We think that someone around him, pitched it off as a good idea, like here's your Obama moment. And I was sitting there scratching my head and I was like, this is incredible because on one hand, they were so furious. They worked very closely with Soleimani in
Yeah.
Syria. And on the other hand, they were providing Trump with cover and saying that he's an idiot and that somebody probably came and, offered this. And I frankly thought the same because I don't think Trump would know Soleimani from Elmo. But the fact that, I could picture the whole scene play out, that someone comes in like a Bolton type Iran hardliner, and says like, oh, here we have a moment for you to take out like a Osama bin Laden, you'll have your Obama moment and whatever. Sure enough, the New York Times, like several months later, confirmed that really Trump didn't know as much about the details of what he was doing. But the Russians were so furious. I've never seen Putin move this fast. Within 48 hours, he flew to Syria. He never flies on a whim like this. And he flew to Syria to have an emergency meeting with Assad, with other IRGC commanders and top Iranian officials. This is how furious. So, absolutely, there is the Russian nexus here because the fact that Trump is doing everything to protect Iran now, well, not protect, but basically whitewashing and, and trying to condition his base that, it would be a good thing for us to have a deal with them, knowing everything, knowing what Russia has been doing. I mean, for God's sakes, Putin stood with Iran's president in January when he was in Russia, and they discussed their joint collaboration, including the nuclear plant that they were going to, open two, three more. With in a joint partnership with Rosatom, you had the CEO of their nuclear agency, Rosatom, saying that, we this is going forward despite sanctions. This is against U.S. sanctions. And that it's going forward, no amount of sanctions or pressure will stop this expansion. So Trump knows that Russia's supplying them with nuclear materials. Trump knows that Russia supplies the Houthis with intelligence and weapons and logistical support, including sending their GRU, he call it agents, to Yemen to assist with those attacks. Trump knows the history between Hezbollah, or maybe if he doesn't, Gabbard can, create it on the Fox News type of, I don't know, with crayons and display and flashy thing.
Not in her interest. She's a Russian agent. No, she's a Russian asset.
Exactly. And the fact that they know that, Russia moves money for Hamas, Russia supplies weapons to Hamas. I mean, and this is going back decades. I remember when the Hamas figure, leader won at the time in, what was it, 2006 or 7. Russia was the first phone call to congratulate. So, I mean, this is a very long standing, and this goes back, to the Soviet days. It's always been that Russia, always provided support, assisted with terrorist attacks with the Palestinian Liberation Front. This was like literally former Russian, military people went from working with the Palestinian Liberation Front off to the Soviet-Afghan War.
Yeah, I'm gonna make two comments here. One is that Assad is still in Moscow, as far as we know. I mean, he's somewhere in Russia. And Assad was, of course, working hand in glove with the Iranians. Ironically, he was an Alawite. They're Sunnis, Shia, excuse me.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, whether it was in Lebanon with Hezbollah or in Syria with Assad, all of this was interconnected. The Iranians were running the show always. That's one. Two, I find it fascinating that the media has completely just taken at face value that Trump is negotiating an Iran nuclear deal as opposed to kicking the can down the road on something. I think this is not a taco situation, as in a time buying situation, at the behest of the Russians, who I think were probably concerned that Netanyahu, who is in once the weakest and also the strongest position he'll ever be in the sense that he has a government that is messianic and will have no problem with him actually attacking Iran, have obviously grown concerned that they're finally going to go through with it and attack Iran. And now Trump all of a sudden is threatening Bibi Netanyahu, his close friend, and saying, don't you dare do anything with Iran. And yet nobody's drawing that connection. Why is Trump doing this now? Because he's not negotiating a nuclear deal. We have to stop. We have to stop with that fallacy right now. And this drives me crazy because he says something in the media after all these years still takes him at face value. He's not negotiating jack shit.
No.
He's buying time. because clearly he was concerned, or Russia was concerned, or somebody was concerned that this time the Israelis really mean it. They're going to go attack Iran. This Gaza war will be drawing to a close in the sense that he can't keep these hostages there much longer. There's going to have to be some sort of deal to get the remaining hostages out. So Netanyahu needs something else. And the something else was going to be Iran. Plus, Iran rightly is about to enrich uranium to the point where
They
they can already produce several nuclear weapons, excuse me. So all of this confluence is happening at the same time. And yet, nobody's asking the question as to what is going on and why is Trump getting engaged now. He's not somebody who cares about, you know, the Saudis aren't asking him to do this.
no,
The Qataris who
no.
played both sides are not
Mhm.
asking him to do this, right? Like, who benefits? Chi
I am.
bono, as they would say in Latin, like chi bono, like who it's a legal term. Who benefits? Who benefits is the Iranians, who now will have more time to, to develop their nuclear arsenal. But that's not who he cares about. The Russians benefit. And the third observation that I'll make, which I really want people to take this away with, the great Russian military, the great superpower of which we have been afraid for decades, has to go ask the Iranians and the North Koreans for military help to train and provide weapons to their military. I mean, my God, could you imagine the United States asked North Korea or some equivalent, and Iran, some equivalent, to train our military? We are training them. They're not training us. We're the ones selling weapons to them because we have the most advanced military weapons. The thing that Ukraine destroyed, which has also been lost, are
Mhm.
Soviet era bombers.
Yeah.
They have the capability to deliver nukes, even here to the United States, certainly to all of Europe. It's not to say that they're not effective, but these are Soviet era bombers from the 1980s. That's what was destroyed. And that's the best they've got because the entire military is corrupt.
Yep.
Everybody is selling it off for parts to enrich themselves, including Vladimir Putin. And that's why you're seeing a war that should have been won in a day, because if a military like the United States had gone in, it would have been won in a day. Maybe not in the way that they would have wanted. It would have been an Iraq boondoggle where obviously you'd have all sorts of issues on the ground, but they would have been in Kiev within a day. I mean, the same way we got to Baghdad, I think within a few days. They couldn't get to Kiev. They actually haven't gotten much further than, I mean, they keep shifting back and forth, but I mean, the battle lines have been static on and off for the last several years. It's because they need people like the Iranians and the North Koreans, as Olga pointed out, to train them and to help them.
The Russian military, and I had said it before the full-scale invasion, because I had several, at the time I was running a Kremlin File podcast.
Right.
And at that time, I knew that Russia was going to launch a full-scale invasion. I mean,
Yeah.
all signs were ticking
Yeah.
off. And people here misunderstood and thought, and I talked to policymakers, and they're like, oh, Russia wants concessions, but there's no concessions. And about 7 months prior to the full-scale invasion, the Russian media shifted extreme. I mean, I've heard, derogatory things said about Ukrainians forever on Russian media, but here it became very organized, very systematic, very, that there's a genocide happening and all the lies and propaganda that they were conditioning people inside of Russia to accept that war was coming. But I since 2022, I worked very closely with Syrian opposition, and we did a lot of joint work between Ukrainian organizations, Syrian organizations, and I can tell you, I mean, I watched how weapons were moved through Syria and how Russians would pick it up at the port. I mean, we have pictures of how this was moving along and then going off to Russia. Um, I remember, how you call it, the Russians and Iranians, setting up joint, how you call it, drone factories in Syria to produce in Syria to make it quicker to transport. Because Syria for Russia was extremely key. Not only was it because of, first of all, Iran is one of their closest allies. I mean, Russia doesn't have many allies in the world. Iran is one of them that for decades has been there with them. But one of the key points that Russia wanted to prop up Assad was because they wanted control of the ports. And for instance, Port Latakia was essential for them to carry out their operations in Africa, because this was the launch pad where everyone they moved supplies, they moved mercenaries, the Wagner group, and whatnot from the port right into Africa and then spread through Africa, whether it's Central African Republic or Congo or Sudan or wherever their operations, they're everywhere. So this Syria was a key place for them to carry out these operations. And to the point, you know, Syrians right now have their country back. They're still finding dead soldiers. One of the Syrians who's there now on the ground texted me a tombstone with a name, and he's like, "Oh, here's another one." I ran it, and it was reported in Russia that he died. He called a few years ago. So they're still finding dead Russians in Syria. I mean, so the whole thing that Trump is actually doing any kind of negotiating is absurd. And people really need to understand this nexus between Russia, Iran, and of course Iran. They didn't give Russia drones and train Russia to not only use the drones but make the drones, to the point that now the Iranian Shaheds are being made inside of Russia. They didn't do this for free. They didn't give them ballistic missiles for free. They did it for nuclear material. I mean, and the fact that, we're sitting here or at least not us, but the media is sitting here and Congress. I mean, I don't understand. Are the Republicans in Congress who were screaming about, the threat that Iran poses and how close they are to nuclear enrichment, which they actually might have enough already for a nuclear bomb,
I think they have
because
enough for about 3 or 4, yeah.
yeah, Israel knows. There's a reason Israel wanted a few months ago to take out their nuclear facilities. They
Yeah,
understand they're getting very close, if not already
yeah.
there. And so, I mean, this is that. So, out of that whole, to wrap this up, out of that whole Putin Trump call, the Ukraine part, honestly, I ignore now. Anything he said, it's like, okay, whatever, just stay the fuck out of here. Go away, go focus on Iran, go focus on something else, and go away. But the Iran part was what caught me, because I was like, this is incredible. I mean, really, this is incredible that Putin volunteered. Oh, I'm going to help you negotiate. I bet you will. I'm sure.
Yeah. Okay, my computer froze up, so I don't have our notes, so you're gonna have to lead the rest of this. So why don't you pull up what you sent and go from there? Because I don't know what's going on with my computer here.
All right. So the next thing, there was a fascinating report that came out of the Telegraph. And basically it was about Darren Beatty, who is a Trump appointee, and that he's married to, what is her name? Yulia Kirilova. So he was in charge of shutting down the Global Engagement Center, shutting down any efforts to counter Russian disinformation. He
Mhm.
dismantled the whole thing. And his wife that he got married to not too long ago, sounds like a honeypot.
Mm,
Um, he got married to her a few years ago. Her uncle was not only in the close proximity to Putin, that Putin actually thanked him for something, maybe having Denise marry Darren,
right.
but he also held Kremlin post. Um, There's Darren Beatty is one of like the top Kremlin propagandists. I mean, the whole U.S. government is filled with these Russian agents and disinformation agents. Ed Martin is one of them, Tulsi Gabbard. But Darren Beatty is one of the top people who has been pushing for quite a while, Russian disinformation. Um, and he actually was fired from the first Trump term because of his ties to white supremacists. So here we go again. We discuss this every week of this, nexus between the Nazis and white nationalists to Russia to Trump. I mean, it's just like one orbit of them. And they all seem to gravitate, like Ed Martin, same thing, an extremist who, um, publicly supported a Holocaust sympathizer, who actually took a photo of himself, to mimic Hitler. And Martin, same thing. He supported him, and he also appeared on Russian state TV over 200 times. So here we have a situation where disinformation, I would honestly argue, is Russia's most powerful and successful weapon. This goes back to Soviet days, even further. They are extremely, you know, they are excellent at all psychological operations, information warfare. They understand that to control people inside the country, that you need, you can't just go and start murdering everyone. You need to have control the narrative and in order to have control over the people. And disinformation, abroad and information warfare operations have been successful in basically polarizing and imploding countries. I mean, we see what's happening in America and whatnot. So this is one of Russia's top, probably only successful weapons. And you have this guy who was married to this Russian woman whose uncle worked in the Kremlin, who the first thing he did when he walked in was dismantle the Russian disinformation agency.
And I
That,
want to and I want to put this in a little bit of a context. So, Nina Jankowicz, right?
mhm,
Nina Jankowicz, for people who don't remember, was appointed by Biden. This is one of Biden's most shameful things that he ultimately did to her, but appointed by Biden to create a disinformation agency. All it was doing was trying to counter Russian disinformation and foreign disinformation and also American disinformation. This was
mhm,
not to abrogate the First Amendment. It was literally to actually, she was the one that wanted to have community notes on Twitter, which ended up happening. But
mhm,
not because it was mandated by Congress, or sorry, mandated by the administration, but she wanted to work with these social media groups, companies, and others to effectively create some sort of entity that ended up becoming community notes on Twitter.
mhm,
And she lasted for about 5 minutes before the Republicans went ballistic, held hearings. Fox News invoked her name, I think, countless times. I think she's actually suing Fox News now as a result of defaming her. Um, but effectively accused her of being Big Brother and trying to abrogate the First Amendment. Biden blinked and shut her down and shut down the agency, which is shameful. And we can talk about all the mistakes that Biden did to get us to this point. That was a big one. That was a complete, in my estimation. She happens to also be a Russia expert. She is somebody whose life has been studying Russia. She worked in Ukraine, working with them on Russian disinformation. She is an expert in this field. This wasn't shut down by mistake. This was shut down because I believe the Russians needed it shut down.
yes. Mhm,
And if you don't know her, give her a follow. I think she's actually on Substack now. She's brilliant, and I believe she has a Substack, and you should take a look at her. It's Nina Jankowicz. But I raise her name because there is a interesting situation going on where things have gone so extreme that not only are we not trying to counter Russian disinformation, we're now actively inviting Russian
yes.
disinformation.
Mhm,
And again, I ask who benefits? And again, I go back to the fact that the media has been cowed into this whole Russia, Russia, Russia hoax, where they're afraid to even write about this for fear of being accused of being part of the Russia, Russia, Russia hoax, which was never a hoax.
Nope.
It was real. I don't know about peeing in a hotel room. I truly don't, to be honest, I truly don't care if that part is true. But the larger issue here was, of course, Russia intervened. And of course, Russia intervened on behalf of Donald Trump and continues to intervene on behalf of Donald Trump. And who benefits from that? Well, Donald Trump certainly has, but also Russia has, even more exponentially. And this is what this is. And this Darren Beatty, my computer's back, so I can take over here. But Darren Beatty is a not just married conveniently to the daughter of Russia's, somebody close to Putin, not just somebody who was kicked out of the first Trump administration, but somebody, as Olga pointed out, who proactively holds up Vladimir Putin as this paragon of Western masculinity, male chauvinism, somebody who told Black people to bend the knee to MAGA, said the world would be much better if we stopped caring about the views of women and people of color. He didn't call them people of color. That's my nice way of calling them, as though we're not my way, my proper way of calling people, as opposed to what he called them. But this is somebody who worships Vladimir Putin precisely because Vladimir Putin thinks that women should take a backseat to men, precisely because he's a male chauvinist, precisely because he's a Christian chauvinist in a very specific kind of Christian Russian Orthodox way, precisely because he hates gay people and other people who are frankly not white Slavs. And even if they are white Slavs like the Ukrainians, he hates them too. And so, you know, it's if it walks like a duck and talks like a duck and acts like a duck, my friends, it is a duck. And every single sign that we see in this administration is pointing to the fact that it is in service to the Russian Federation and specifically to Vladimir Putin. Why? I don't think we know the definitive answer to that. But again, if it walks like a duck who ended up in Moscow in 1987 with his Eastern European asset wife, and it talks like a duck who met with the Russian consul general to the UN as the first thing the consul general to the UN did upon landing in New York, it might be a duck.
The only thing that I'd add, I'm not sure that we're doing it on behalf of Russia or whether Russia has literally hijacked our agencies because every single agency minus the CIA, we have a Russian asset. You
My
had
God,
Cash Patel, who is now in charge of the FBI, who took money from this trader who works with Russian intelligence, Lapotanak. He took money from him to go on and to bash U.S. agencies. Literally every single one of them in key agencies, if you look, I mean, starting with Tulsi Gabbard, they are in control of intelligence or in control of, disinformation or kleptocracy. Everything was shut down. The kleptocracy task force shut down. Russia now can run around, buy five, whatever it is, $1 million gold visas, send their corrupt thugs into the United States. And that's it. You had the disinformation shut down. I mean, anything and everything that touched Russia, to counter their money laundering operations, to counter their cyber attacks, to counter their information warfare, anything touching Russia, these agencies have
and
been
and and,
dismantled.
and it is so insidious. They have burrowed so much into our government that we now have. Remember Big Balls, the 19-year-old
Yes, yes,
college.
yes.
Yeah, I don't know if he's a dropout or last we checked, he was a student at Northeastern University, a sophomore. He's 19 years old. He was born in December of 2015, 2005. I mean, he's 19 years old. He was placed by Elon Musk, Putin's phone buddy, into the federal government. He was supposed to be there for 120 days. He yesterday was announced is now a full-time government employee at the Government Services Agency, at the GSA, which is an incredibly important agency. Not many people know about it, but they are in charge of everything, all the staffing, all the procurement, that's them. And uh, to give you some background on Big Balls, everybody focuses on the fact that he, this is such a, I mean, it's so brilliant, right? if I wanted somebody to focus on the shiny object here, I give myself a little nickname like Big Balls so they wouldn't focus on the other aspect of his life. This guy's grandfather was a KGB, either general colonel, I don't remember what he
Mm.
was, who was ostensibly a double agent for the United States and was shot and executed by the KGB once they figured out that he was a double agent for the United States. Maybe, maybe. But I will say this. After that happened, his widow and his daughter, who is the mother of Big Balls, were allowed to immigrate to the United States, where he went to Rye Country Day School. Let me tell you something, not a cheap school. And now is a student at Northeastern University. I can tell you this, much like I can tell you about Ivana Trump going back and forth between the United States and Czechoslovakia, despite the fact that she ostensibly left and defected and went beyond the Iron Curtain, but somehow was always allowed to come back and visit her
Yeah,
family.
which was
Did not
unheard of.
happen. Did
No,
not happen. Were that to be the case for all of us, a lot of heartache would have been saved for a lot of people, including for my family, because we were not allowed to go back and visit our
nobody.
family.
Once you left
Nobody.
the
Once you
Soviet
left, that was
Union,
it. And
you
once you
never
left the
thought
Eastern
you'd
Bloc,
see. Hmm.
similarly, if your husband is executed as a traitor to the state after being a general or a colonel in the KGB, I can assure you with every fiber of my being that if he was truly executed as an American spy, his wife and children would not have been allowed to then leave
No.
and go to the very country on behalf of which this man spied. It just doesn't happen. Because
I
they had,
can
I mean,
solidify because we had another double agent, informant, the KGB informant, who at the time his name was handed in either by Hansen or Ames, one of the
right.
traitors who at the time handed his name. He was recalled back. He was executed. His wife was executed. And there was another one who managed. I mean, reading the story really is a spy movie. I mean, he managed to get out of Russia with the help of MI6 in the 80s. I mean, they literally put him like between the cardboard,
Right.
like between a thing, and drove him out to get him over the border. His wife was executed.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't happen. And the
Hmm.
one thing you have to know about the Russians is they play a really long game. Like they play a really long game. Think about the people that they burrowed here. Remember the Americans, the TV show, which I never actually finished watching, but that was based on a true story. They burrow people here for decades. You
Hmm.
just saw that happening with some Russians in was it in the Czech Republic that were part of the exchange? Was it in Prague or somewhere in Eastern Europe? Uh, for decades. I mean, they marry, they have children. The children have no idea who their parents are. It's so to think absurdly that Big Ball's mother and grandmother were simply just allowed to leave the Soviet Union after he was executed and come to the United States, and suddenly Big Balls is now burrowed in the United States government at the age of 19. Some random guy, a
Still
19-year-old
running.
of all the 19-year-olds in all the world
Mhm.
who have no qualifications to work for the federal government and be at the highest, I forgot what GS level he is, but the highest GS level possible, making more money than people who worked for the federal government for 40 years. Of all the gin joints in all the world, that's the guy that's now burrowed in the federal government. And that's just one example. This guy that Olga just talked about, of all the gin joints in all the world, this guy marries a Russian woman who's connected to Russian intelligence, and suddenly he's now working for the federal government,
Dismantling.
dismantling the federal government. Tulsi Gabbard, of all the people in all the world who had to become the DNI to have access to the president's daily brief, which he doesn't read, but let me assure you she does. The woman who spent time in Moscow, Vladimir Putin, Stan, I mean, would go on Tucker Carlson's show and actually exceed Tucker Carlson's sycophancy towards the Russians if possible. That's who's in charge of our national intelligence now.
And you could imagine that not only is she in charge, that she will fabricate the national intelligence report to protect Russia. So,
Uh,
I mean, if there's any threats or anything coming out towards Europe or whatever, she'll be like, ah, that's irrelevant. I'll add one more that I had him up for later, but just since
Yeah.
we're on this, Russian asset tour inside of the government, the Senate confirmed this guy, Michael Duffy, and Michael Duffy was the one who ordered the freeze on military aid for Ukraine in 2019 when Trump tried to extort Zelensky to open a sham investigation into the Bidens in order to interfere in our election. So we have one more on the way, the one who froze aid. Now he will be the Undersecretary of Defense for Acquisition and Sustainment. So now we have one more key position, Pentagon, in charge of our procurement and contracts, and played the key role besides Trump in shutting down weapon aid that was approved by Congress, what Trump got impeached for.
Yeah, and that actually leads to this next topic I want to talk about, but it's part and parcel of the same thing, which is I wrote a Substack yesterday, so please visit it if you can, called Russia's Useful Idiots. That's actually a very nice way of putting who they are. They could be useful idiots or they could just be full on assets. I have no idea. But I already mentioned, Keith Kellogg as saying that this attack on Ukraine is not constructive because it's going to force Russia to retaliate. Well, no shit. But then you have Keith Kellogg is not particularly relevant because although he has a big title, he has no power. But people who do have power in this government, and I'll start with Steve Bannon, who is basically the godfather of the MAGA movement. It's not Trump, it's Bannon. He's kind of the, if I can make a religious analogy, he's the John the Baptist of the of the movement. He raged on his podcast effectively saying that he cannot believe that the Ukrainians did not give Trump a heads up about this attack. And as a result, we should pull all military aid. We should get rid of the minerals deal, which, P.S., we should get rid of the minerals deal, but for other reasons. And
I
the whole
don't think
thing.
there's military aid going, so.
Yeah, but, we should get rid of that's it. Ukraine is dead to us. Okay. There is a reason why the Ukrainians did not give Trump a heads up. We just spent about 20 minutes talking about part of the reason. The other reason is I don't think the Ukrainians wanted this ending up on Steve Witkoff's personal cell phone on Signal, which is what we do with military war plans. We actually, as we know, have a tendency to put them on Signal and have Pete Hegseth disseminate them to everybody. So, yeah, no surprise the Ukrainians wouldn't give us a heads up. Nobody's giving us a heads up about anything. I mean, my God, if any foreign government is giving us a heads up about some intelligence stuff that they're doing, or at least giving Trump a heads up about it, they're stupider than they don't deserve to engage any kind of military action if that's what they're doing. So you had Bannon talking about this. You had some guy named Dan Caldwell, who's if you remember, there was a big blow up between Hegseth and a bunch of his staff in the Pentagon. Dan Caldwell was one of them. He left under a cloud, but still very much the MAGA movement. He was going on, basically trashing Ukraine for this. And then, you have Hitler fanboys, who in the MAGA movement who consistently talk about how this is Joe Biden's responsibility. This was planned for 18 months and Joe Biden did this. Probably. I mean, I suspect, of course, the United States, at least the Biden administration, was aware that something was being planned. And if that's the case, good for them. I hope we had something to do with it. That's no shame. I mean, if you care at all about Ukraine, you probably, despite hating Joe Biden, should give him a heads up. You should give him a prop for helping out, but not these guys. And I mean, again, I ask, who benefits here? What possible reason could these people have to be trashing this audacious, incredible dismantling of part of the Russian nuclear triad that, let me stress again, was geared towards delivering nuclear weapons to American soil? And it's not like the Russians haven't been saber rattling, and they have been, about nuking New York City since they invaded Ukraine. The UK, Germany, and the United States. That's where
I
Putin's.
watched before. under the first Trump term, and this is
Yeah.
not the first time, state TV having just, part of their regular scheduling, like a interactive video of how a nuclear weapon is sent from Russia to Nevada. And then they watch the full. I mean, this is like for them entertainment. It's like
Yeah.
how in the Coliseum people, assembled for entertainment to watch beheadings.
So
I'm
if
like,
you
whatever.
yeah. So if you care about so if you care about America, I mean, if you care about not getting nuked, if you care about the United States and the American people and not getting nuked,
Say
and
thank you to Ukraine.
somebody's doing your dirty work for you so you don't have to, and you have plausible deniability because nobody gave you a heads up. My God, get on your knees and thank the Ukrainians because you're a little bit safer today than you were yesterday. But that's not what they're doing. And again, I ask the question, why? Why? Now, Bannon's had a long-standing relationship with the Russians, going back to even before Cambridge Analytica. But there was a whistleblower who was part of the whole investigation into Cambridge Analytica that said that the only thing that Bannon wanted to test during the 2016 campaign as part of the Cambridge Analytica play was Putin and Russia, and what the Americans' reaction would be to messaging and propaganda about alongside Putin and Russia. Why? I suspect they've been funding him for a long time. We won't know because none of that's disclosable. But you have to ask the question again. Why are these people not grateful for the fact that the Ukrainians just made us safer? These are weapons that were able to deliver nuclear weapons to us. And I stress again, it's not like the Russians haven't threatened to do that over the last 3 years.
Yeah. Yeah,
So,
I mean, it was very interesting to watch, to say the least. You had everyone celebrating, for the most part, who's normal,
yeah,
what happened
yeah,
after the amazing operations Ukrainians pulled off. And like I said, the Russians were taken by surprise because, I monitored their Telegram channels,
yeah,
and you didn't see a response, a coordinated response. It took them several hours to come up with one. And that's when you suddenly see this onslaught of this, disinformation, fear mongering. The Ukrainians just started World War III and all the bullshit that they push.
yeah,
The Oreshnikom missile that's coming, and everything is just coming, and
yeah,
whatever. I mean, everything coming out of Russia should frankly be ignored. But it was interesting to see how coordinated it became. It took them hours to get coordinated, and like I say, every single time there's a major event, this is like over the past, over a decade, the way to flush out Russian assets and agents is to see, who responds and how. I mean, literally,
mm,
they're like rats who crawl out of the sewer, and they all are on the same talking point, and it doesn't fail, whether it was in 2014, and you suddenly saw this, web of like underground influence agents who rise out of nowhere and suddenly are all repeating the same talking points, or over a decade and a half, there are a million situations like this, and that's why it's fascinating. Once something does happen, you can easily kind of flush them out, and God knows I have a file and a half,
yeah,
hundreds between U.S. and Europe, um, and in Ukraine, who are like this, and this is from precisely this. When something happens, you see them, like Russia sends a memo, like we're paying you rubles, get the fuck out, say something. Here's your talking points, and that's it. And this is what we saw. Um, with just to finish up with Ukraine, um, Hegseth announced, because he's too busy, maybe he had a keg
yep,
party, that he will not attend the Ukraine Defense Contact Group meeting. Not virtually, not in
yep.
person. And it just shows you again the position of where, the United States is. Frankly, I'm relieved. Are you okay? Oh my god.
I don't know what's going on with this camera, so I apologize, but yes, I'm okay. Sorry about that. Or this whole mic or this whole
I'm
situation, but
back.
but go ahead. This is what I do for, trying to be high tech, but anyway, go ahead.
um, so Hegseth announced it sends a message. Obviously, Europe, is getting the message. Ukrainians already got the message that the U.S. has checked out. And it's honestly disgraceful. Frankly, I'm grateful because I mean, the last thing we need is
Mm.
Hegseth in this meeting with 50 countries who are organizing weapons for Ukraine, and then for him to put everything on his signal chat or telechat or whatever and start, oh, okay, and this country's sending X amount of ammunition. This one's going to send X amount of F-16s and whatever. So it's for me personally, I'm happy he's skipping this one out. But on a bigger geopolitical thing, it just shows you, further reiterates the U.S. has checked out. They're not interested in not assisting Ukraine, but also Europe. I mean, frankly, they couldn't care less if Russia rolls tanks in tomorrow to Estonia. They'll be like, not our problem.
Well, they've said
Hopefully, the
so. I
European,
mean,
yeah,
they've said so, it's not like this is a secret. I mean, he said he's focusing on China and apparently Greenland. He's focusing on the manifest destiny part of the world, which is the American sphere of influence plus Greenland, which apparently now they think is the American sphere of influence, and also China and what's happening with Taiwan Strait. Although if they were really focusing on that, I'm not sure that they're doing the right thing here with these tariffs. But nevertheless,
and
um, yeah.
preparing to pull out troops. 4,500 U.S. troops from South Korea, because, if you want to deter China, you would actually pull from your ally.
Well, listen,
So,
they're all upset because you saw Trump's preferred candidate in South Korea lose, and now they're all up in arms because they think South Korea is going to be getting closer to China. Well, my friends, what did you think was going to happen when when you slap a billion tariffs on South Koreans imports, and South Korea imports to us tremendously and is one of the world's largest economies? Like, what did you think was going to happen when you proactively went after South Korea's economy? Did you think that they were going to continue to be friendly to you and threatening to pull out troops? I mean, all of it is just so stupid and short-sighted. And again, I can't tell if it's that they're all smart and have somehow decided they're going to destroy this country, or they're just doing it because they're incompetent. It can't be both, right? So it's got to be one or the other.
I think in Trump's mind, frankly, I think he operates because he's a simpleton. I
Yeah.
think he operates and wants to split the world in three. He wants to give Russia its sphere of influence. U.S. has its sphere of influence. China has its. I think this is what it is, just because he's a simpleton, and for him, Russia is a great superpower, which it's not. Not even close. California had is more of a great
Yeah.
superpower than Russia. Frankly, any country is. But I think it has to do with the fact that he has that old school thinking that it's a U.S., China, and Russia who lead the world, and I think he's wants it that way, and wants China to have whatever they want, Russia to have whatever they want, and then the U.S. has its own interest that they want. I
Yeah.
think it's that, dictators ink, or whatever you want to call it, autocratic ink or
I
whatever.
I wanna talk, one I know we're gonna wrap up soon, but I wanna go just talk about one more thing quickly, which is that the State Department again, let me remind people, Marco Rubio was, confirmed by the Senate 99-0. That means every single Democrat voted for Marco Rubio, a stain on their legacy that they will never live down, because anybody who watches this podcast or listens to this podcast, and anybody who pays attention could have predicted what was gonna happen to Marco Rubio, but nevertheless, Trump is now accusing key European allies of free speech backsliding. Trump is accusing people of free speech backsliding. The man who's going after Harvard University and Columbia University and anybody else who does not espouse MAGA talking points, the person who's pulling over people at the airports, check their phones to make sure that they don't say anything negative about Trump, is accusing people of free speech backsliding. I assume when I fly into Europe sometime soon, my phone will not be checked to make sure that I'm complying with Emmanuel Macron or Germ I mean, like, it's absurd. But so he's gonna establish a new office, this is Rubio now, of Office of Natural Rights, and it's being created to push this. And at the same time that Trump is praising Marine Le Pen and Viktor Orban and others who are just absurd. So what do you make of all this?
So I'll just add two quick things and then one more story I just
Yeah.
want to quickly breeze over and then we can wrap up.
Yep.
So Rubio is opening this office, and basically this goes on top of last week that they said they're going to issue, imagine, to our allies, to the Brits, to Europeans, travel bans, visa bans, for anyone who tries to moderate content online. So if you are in Europe trying to counter Russian disinformation via platforms, then you will have a visa ban. Which, I mean, again, who benefits? On top of it, they're opening this office, and just to, which for itself speaks to what is happening, that they are again trying to dismantle. Not only they dismantled U.S. countering of Russian disinformation, they are trying to bully Europe into doing the same as they're propping up all of Russia's far right parties in Europe. So you have all these far right extremist movements in Germany and Romania, Moldova, France, I mean, and they're propping them up. And at the same time, they want to, the actual democratic leaders who believe in democracy, bully them. And like you said a few weeks ago, that tariffs is also going to be part of it because they will use tariffs to try to both for Ukraine, for whatever extremist agenda that they are pushing, they'll use tariffs. But another thing I didn't put onto this list, and we can get into it later, but I think people really need to know. Rubio is opening an office of re-immigration. Re-immigration is ethnic cleansing. This
Yep.
comes after the far right extremist Nazi groups in Europe, and they are opening an Office of Reimmigration to partner with DHS. This doesn't only impact illegal immigrants, they also, in this thing, will go after naturalized citizens. So if you are not in line with the agenda of Cy Orange, Agent Orange King, then you possibly can have a visit from ICE who can start processing you to get out of this country because you are not in the, values, the fascist values that they're pushing. So this, I think, is extremely important because this, all ties together of what they're doing. Not only are they, like turning U.S. foreign policy, based off of extremist, white nationalist extremist, and the fact that they want to go after that. So, I mean, this, very clear what Rubio is doing.
Yeah, and, as people who are both naturalized citizens, I guess it's only a matter of time for us. A
Text
couple,
me before they knock on your door.
yeah.
I'll come and try to join in the same
Well,
cell with you.
so couple of things here. One is, I will not be here next week. I'm traveling, so we will not be having the show next week. The other is just an announcement. So many of you joined Olga and me for our town hall, our first town hall a couple weeks ago, and we're so grateful to all of you for doing that. For our paid subscribers, it was just a conversation for people who weren't aware of it or don't know. It was for paid subscribers who subscribe to either Olga's or my Substack. So hopefully you subscribe to one or both of our Substacks as paid subscribers. But what we were able to do was have a Zoom conversation where we actually met so many of you online, and just took questions and had a real discussion as opposed to this where Olga and I chat and people obviously listen. But it was just very nice to be able to answer questions and have a real discussion
And
with
to see
people.
people.
And to see people, because so many of you email us, and now it was great to put faces to names, and a lot of people didn't want to go on camera. That's cool too. But a lot of people put in their questions into the chat if they didn't want to just ask them directly. we feel like we're building this incredible community, and there were people not just from the United States, but people from all over the world who joined, and we are so, so grateful to you. We are going to do one more of these. We're going to do this as a series, but the next one is going to be on June 17th at 3 p.m. Eastern. The reason we're choosing 3 p.m. is because we want to make sure that people on the West Coast of the United States can join us, but also people who are in Europe. It's not going to be too late for you. I know it's late in the sense that it's sometimes 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night, but nevertheless, hopefully you can still join us. There were people in Australia who wondered why we were doing this at 3 p.m. We're so sorry. We wish we could. We wish we could do this at a reasonable time for everybody, but I think the problem is when it's 3 p.m. Here, it's the middle of the night there. We can't do anything about that, unfortunately. But if you want to join, please become a paid subscriber to either of Olga's Substacks or to mine or to all of them, and join us on the 17th at 3 p.m. We would really, really love to see you and to meet you and to continue this discussion and have it be a two-way street. In the meantime, and I guess that's the next time we're going to see people, Olga, right? Because our next Substack live, this Pax Americana Substack live, is going to be on the 19th. So if you
Oh,
want,
okay. I
yeah,
don't even know what year my calendar. I'm like
yeah,
looking at the wall.
so if
Wait.
you, yeah, and hopefully I will fix all of my technical problems by then. So I apologize for those as well. So if you want to see us before the next Pax Americana and talk to us on a Zoom, please do that. And we will be sending a link to sign up for that for our paid
Yes.
subscribers. And other than that, I hope everybody has a wonderful next couple of weeks and we will see you together soon. I will be not sure how much I'll be writing about politics while I'm abroad, but I'll maybe be doing a travelogue. I'm going to a pretty interesting place, so I'll be doing a little travelogue on my Substack to the extent that I can from there. And in the meantime, thank you to everybody for joining us all over the
Have a
world.
great trip. And
Thank you. If I get stopped,
see,
if I get stopped at the border,
you have my number. Text me. I'll make sure to point.
I
And
won't
we'll
have your
start a movement here.
I won't. Let me put it to you this way: I won't have your number because I suspect the first thing I'll do is take my cell phone. But if you don't see me on the 17th and you don't see me on the 19th, assume that that's what happened and try to find me in CCOT
Well,
or wherever.
you should have an emergency text. I do, and an emergency post always ready to go where you just hit send quick before anyone
Yeah.
grabs your phone. And
Um.
same thing on online if you want to get people's attention, even if
Yeah.
it's help, and
Yeah.
just press send and get it out there. But I'll
Yeah.
keep an eye. No, you will be back fine, and we'll see everyone on the 17th. I'm gonna put together the show notes, all the articles and everything we discussed. I'll send it out to everyone later today. And that's it. And we'll
All right.
see you.
Thanks, everybody. Great to see you.
Bye.
Bye.